Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me. As always, our mini Dynasty series concludes today. 5 episodes. If you have missed them already, tonight, the 6th and final one, we did overall Dynasty quarterback rankings and tiers. We did running back rankings and tiers. We did overall Dynasty wide receiver rankings and tiers. Did overall Dynasty tight end rankings and tiers. The last episode, I did 32 Dynasty buys based on current Dynasty value, stock up, stock down. And now 32 Dynasty sells. Guys, that if the price was right, I'd be willing to move them. A lot of guys tonight, it does not mean I am down on them. But based on their value, based on what I think they can bring back in a return, these are 32 guys that either I would sell, I think, a year early and maximize their value if I wasn't a contender. I think their value is a little bit inflated, even though I might like the player. I think you can bring back so much in value that I'd be willing to make the move. So these are 32 names that if the price was right, these are not guys I'm just dumping away. I'll go through each one and talk about, what it would take in terms of like a strong buy if the right price package came around, but 32 names, one from every team that I would be potentially looking to move if I felt the return was worth the investment. So let's jump right into it. First one up is the Arizona Cardinals, and this definitely might be a little confrontational, but my dynasty sell is wide receiver Marvin Harrison. I still like Marvin Harrison. I still think he's a big-time prospect. I think he's going to be better this year. But when you look at dynasty rankings right now, I just think Marvin Harrison's value is a little too inflated. I think it's too inflated in redraft leagues, and I think it's a little bit inflated in dynasty settings. I think people still want to have him in that top 11 to 15 range, and I'm not sure that's where he warrants going right now. We saw him have struggles last year creating separation. If he doesn't create more separation in his routes and at the top of his routes, he has to be elite at the catch point, and I think he could be. But the margin of error becomes so much smaller that he has to be as dominant as T. Higgins. But T. Higgins also has Jamar Chase dealing with the best defenders and the double teams. He has to play on that level. Marvin Harrison could be a really good wide receiver, but he could be somewhere from Michael Pittman to Cortland Sutton to T. Higgins. If he's that, he's a really good fantasy producer. He's a really good NFL player. But he's not an elite dynasty asset. He's not a top 12 dynasty wide receiver if he's somewhere on the Michael Pittman, Cortland Sutton to T. Higgins spectrum. He's a very good player. He's a very, maybe great player, but he's not an elite player. And he's still being treated as an elite asset. So again, am I looking to move Marvin Harrison? No. But if I could turn Marvin Harrison into Ladd McConkey or Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think I would do it. Their ability to create separation, I think they're going to see more targets. I think they have, I like the ceiling and the floor higher on those guys than I do for Marvin Harrison. If I could throw in a second round pick, let's say, or swap a first for a 2 and I get back Brian Thomas or something like that, I would do that as well if people still look at Marvin Harrison on the same level as Brian Thomas. Give me Brian Thomas right now. If I have to add a sweetener, I would. That's the kind of move. That's the only type of moves. If I can get a Ladd McConkey, if I can get a Jackson Smith-Njigba, if I could somehow turn it into Brian Thomas, I'd be willing to sell high because I think his value is still up at that level, but I think it should be a little bit lower. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons sell Kyle Pitts. The little buzz from training camp, I think that's a good possibility that maybe you can finally get out of it from him and still get back something decent in terms of either a rookie pick or maybe another player. In one of my leagues, I turned Kyle Pitts into Tucker Kraft. I would do that all day and every day. I talked about Tucker Kraft on the last podcast, the Dynasty Buy. If I could sell Kyle Pitts and turn him into Tucker Kraft, I would. I think Kyle Pitts could have a little bit of a resurgence, but his elite dynasty production, I think, is over. Maybe he could be a low tight end 1, probably a mid to high tight end 2, but I think it's probably going to be with a different team if he ever elevates back into a real dynasty asset, and we don't know where he's going to end up. Are they going to maximize the skill set? He's not a guy who can play in line, so you got to have a clear plan. Can he create separation against nickel corners and safeties? Because that's who's going to be lined up on him. The Falcons have never shown the ability to get him matched up a lot in terms of against linebackers and create that mismatch. So he's got to be able to show he can win against safeties and nickelbacks. Has not shown an ability to really do that. And this time in the NFL, Since his rookie year, it seems like the Falcons have been a little bit down on him. He's lost playing time every single year, more than you would expect from a guy taken as high as he was in the top 10. So I just think the little bit of buzz that's out there right now, maybe you can use it as a way to sell Kyle Pitts and get back something in return. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens. My sell would be running back Derrick Henry. Now, again, listen carefully here. I would have to not be a contender. If I was a contender, I would 100% not be selling Derrick Henry. There would be absolutely no reason to sell Derrick Henry if you were a contender. I think you could still have a great year. But if you are a bottom tier playoff team, seed 5, seed 6, competing for a playoff spot, or you're a rebuilding team, I would sell before his value starts to come down. He is still worth a lot. We've seen how productive he was. So if I would, Derrick Henry would be one of those guys that I would want to get out a year early than a year late. So if I wasn't a legitimate contender, top 3, 4 on paper, and real shot to, I think, win the championship, I would be willing to move Derrick Henry now before I think his value really starts to dip off. Next up, Buffalo Bills. My sell would be Keon Coleman. We talked about him a little bit over the last couple episodes. Keon Coleman is a guy who I liked coming out of college. But since last year when the Bills drafted him, I had Matt Harmon on the podcast. He talked about his concerns that the Bills were going to ask him to be an outside X wide receiver. And that's exactly what they asked him to do his rookie year. I think that is exactly what they're going to ask him to do his second year. That is not Keon Coleman's strength. I do not think he has the separation ability to win there. So everything is contested. And yes, he'll make some plays, but he's a guy who I think would be best used as a big slot, create mismatches inside, use his size and frame on more shorter stuff to see more volume and more targets. And I just don't think we're going to see that. So as a guy who still is a relatively young player, could find some people that were like, you know what, he had a solid rookie year, not a great, but maybe takes the next step. Bills still don't have a clear alpha wide receiver. I think if you can pivot him to one of the wide receivers from this year's draft class, like Kyle Williams or Jack Bech, I would do it. If you could trade him, for a second round pick that you think would be a high early second round rookie pick next year, I would, but I would probably look to get a player because I think next year's rookie class is going to be a little bit on the downside. So I don't know how much I want to acquire a lot of 2026 rookie picks. Carolina Panthers, kind of the same thing as what I just talked about with Keon Coleman. It's wide receiver Xavier Leggett. It's a first-round pick last year. Didn't think he should have been. They went out and got Ted McMillan. Adam Thielen's still there. We saw Jalen Colker develop a little bit last year. I don't think Xavier Leggett is this. I think he's more name than substance right now. I think he's going to have a role. But I just don't know if it's going to amount to a lot of fantasy production. But because he has that first round draft capital, because last year he was probably a mid-second round rookie pick, he still has some cachet to his name. Because Bryce Young developed a little bit at the end of the year and Dave Canales is a really good creative offensive mind, I think some people might still be intrigued. Same thing. If I could turn Xavier Leggett into Kyle Williams or Jack Bech or Jalen Knowles, somebody from this year's rookie class, I would do that. Next up, Chicago Bears, DJ Moore. Couple reasons here. Now, I am a little bit intrigued with the recent training camp buzz that they're going to use him in a variety of ways, and he's going to line up in the backfield, and maybe Luther Burden's early struggles is going to impact, and DJ Moore is going to be the guy that becomes the clear target hog in Chicago. And if that's the case, this is not a good dynasty sell. But I'm a believer in Luther Burden long-term. I'm a believer in Colston Loveland long-term. And I do just wonder if DJ Moore at some point is the odd man out. Does Rome Odunze take the next step? Does Burden and Loveland slowly start to become an integral part? If Ben Johnson wants to operate more towards the middle of the field like he did with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, I think that favors Luther Burden, Colston Loveland. Rome Odunze was a really high pick last year that I think they are heavily invested in. If DJ Moore has moved on after next season, who knows where he ends up? So this is one of those things where you could maybe get out ahead before he might lose some value, but all bets are off if he becomes the integral piece that Ben Johnson decides to cater the entire offense around. Then he's probably devalued and you'd want to get him. So it's a little bit of a touch and go. I would try to sell high on DJ Moore if I could, but it better be a pretty good offer coming back to think about moving him, because if things go the way where Ben Johnson chooses him to evolve the offense around, then we could be in for a monster best statistical season of DJ Moore's career. Cincinnati Bengals, wide receiver T. Higgins. Again, this is another one. If you're a contender, you're probably not looking to move T. Higgins. But his deal is a little bit on the phony side. I don't know. I think they wanted to bring him back, but they're looking at it as this might be a 1 or 2 year. Let Joe Burrow have both his guys, keep Joe Burrow happy. But if we continue to struggle other areas, we're going to have to not allocate so many resources to the wide receiver position, so many dollars that they might look to move on from T. Higgins. Most of his guaranteed money is gone after the first year or year and a half. So I don't think he's locked into Joe Burrow long term. So again, this would be one of those things. If I could turn T. Higgins and something else into a Ladd McConkey or Jackson Smith-Njigba, I would do it. If I could turn T. Higgins and a first-round pick into Brian Thomas, I would do it. He still has a lot of value. He still has a lot of name brand, but I don't know if he's locked in there long-term as much as it might appear to be. Cleveland Browns, tight end David Njoku. A little bit of an interesting one. It was tough to find one on Cleveland that I would strongly recommend. But David Njoku might not be on Cleveland next year. They have Harold Fannin waiting in the wings. If he does stay in Cleveland, then there's going to be some type of like dual tight end group where I could see both of them taken away from the other one. If he goes to another team, well, then it's up in the air, right? If he ends up in the right spot, maybe he becomes an integral part, plays with a good quarterback. A lot of times in free agency, these guys end up taking contracts from bad teams. Does he end up on another bad team, another poor quarterback situation, and then he's aging and in a bad situation? So I think if right now he's such a focal point of that Browns offense, whoever the quarterback might be, that I think you could say, listen, him and Jerry Jeudy might be the two guys. We can maybe look to maximize his value right now and then get out and then not have that uncertainty of what might happen to him next year. And he's still looked at as a clear dynasty tight end one. Maybe you could pivot him again into something else, either like more at the tight end position, or if you have, an extra tight end that you can move, maybe you could, trade him for a running back or wide receiver to fill another void. Dallas Cowboys, running back Javonte Williams. If he's named the clear-cut starter, if it looks like in training camp he's the guy preseason, I would sell as soon as possible. I would take a second-round rookie pick, an early third-round rookie pick if I think that team's going to be bad. I do not think Javonte Williams is the long-term answer. I think it's going to end up being a split backfield. Miles Sanders, Jaden Blue, maybe they make a trade for Travis Etienne or somebody like that. I would get out on Javonte Williams as soon as they can. So if he looks like he's going to be the clear-cut starter and somebody's desperate for a running back and they're still thinking about Javonte Williams, the great prospect coming out of college and the early career success in the NFL, and you could kind of get rid of him and get an asset back or a draft pick, I would take advantage of that preseason or early into this NFL season. Denver Broncos. Wide receiver Marvin Mims would be my recommended sell. For whatever reason, he just can't seem to earn clear-cut playing time there. We see bits and pieces. He's still got a lot of name cachet because he was a Debbie Darling, the guy who was talked about for years in college football. People want him to be an integral part, but they re-signed Courtland Sutton to a big-time contract. They're going to, at some point, get a young tight end, I think, that fits what Sean Payton wants. Last year's rookie Devontae Vele is a guy who intrigues them, and we saw glimpses of him being productive last year. So Marvin Mims is just kind of in the shuffle here with a bunch of guys they drafted this year. They invested a third-round pick in another rookie wide receiver this year. So they have a lot of guys who can kind of fill that void that if Mims still has some cachet to him, I would move him. If I can get a third-round rookie pick, I would sell him. Next up, Detroit Lions, running back David Montgomery. Again, if you're winning playing for this year and you need David Montgomery on your roster, then obviously you can't sell. But he's another guy. I would rather get out a year early than a year late. And with Montgomery, we have a new offensive coordinator in Detroit. What if this new offensive coordinator caters more towards Jahmyr Gibbs? What if the separation between touches starts to widen a little bit? And maybe it's not 55-45. Maybe it's 65-35 or 60-40 or 70-30. I don't think that's impossible. And if that happens, David Montgomery's fantasy value craters from like a low wide running back 2 to like a running back 4 or a flex. So again, if you're not a contender, get out now, get a younger player, maybe try to trade him for like a Trey Benson if you're a rebuilding team, something like that, where maybe you can catch a guy ascending for a guy that I think is descending based on the age, new setup there in Detroit, potentially more going towards Jahmyr Gibbs with a new offensive coordinator. I'd be willing to sell on Montgomery. Packers, wide receiver Jaden Reed. I like Reed, a player. I liked him coming out of college. I liked what he brought to the table his rookie year. But he hasn't taken the next step. And now they went out and got Golden. I think they're still shuffling that wide receiver room. That I think we could see Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed. I don't know if any of them are there for the long haul. So I think that Tucker Kraft's going to be there. Marcus Golden's going to be there. I think Jaden Reed, while I do think Green Bay will throw more this year, I think as much as I like the player, I don't know if we're ever going to see him get back the fantasy value that we once thought he was projecting towards after his rookie year. So if someone's still in on him and thinks he could be a wide receiver 3 consistently, I think you can look to pivot to that person and get a pretty solid asset back in a trade for Jaden Reed. Houston Texans, running back Joe Mixon. Now, this might be a tough one with the injury right now, but if Joe Mixon gets back, starts performing during the year, they don't have a lot behind him. They have Woody Marks and aging and, heavy mileage Nick Chubb. If Joe Mixon comes back, is the clear-cut guy, is getting 18 to 20 touches a week like he pretty much always does when he's healthy, I would see, if I'm not a contending team, I would look to move him immediately. And I'm a Joe Mixon guy. I've always been a Joe Mixon fan on the football field. I always thought he was a very underappreciated quality runner. Teams like him. He gets heavy workload. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. But again, if you're not a contending team, get out now where you could still get back an asset. Maybe you can get back a Trey Benson and a 3rd-round pick for a team that's a contender. Once Mixon gets healthy, I think you just kind of got to pause it right now, though. You got to let him get healthy. You got to let people see that he's the clear-cut starter in Houston. Hope that he gets off to a solid start to the year, and then maybe look to pivot off of him if you're not a contender. Indianapolis Colts, wide receiver A.D. Mitchell, another guy with a hot commodity in Devy leagues. I think he's still got his fan base that people think there's a lot of upside and intrigue to him. I love Josh Downs and I like Michael Pittman. The Colts quarterback situation is obviously very much up in the air long term. They just drafted Tyler Warren. Is there room for A.D. Mitchell to really be an integral part of this? I don't think so. So he's one of those guys, if I can get a 3rd-round rookie pick for him, I'm getting him off my roster now, taking the 3rd-round rookie pick, because I think his value is going to continue to go down and he'll have almost no value. I think he might still have a little bit of value as a second-year player and such a guy that people were so intrigued with coming into the NFL in terms of like that prototypical outside wide receiver. Next up, the Jaguars. Running back Travis Etienne. I've been on record by Bashal Tuden. I think Travis Etienne will not finish the year on the Jaguars, whether he's on the Bears, whether he's on the Cowboys. I think Travis Etienne is not going to be on the Jaguars the whole year. I think they will slowly move towards Bashal Tuden. Tank Bigsby's still there. I think Travis Etienne still has some name value. I think they probably can get like a round 5 pick for him in a trade. I don't think they're going to give him a new contract. So I think Etienne could be on a different team before the year's over. If I can get out from him now, I would. Next up, Kansas City Chiefs, running back Isaiah Pacheco. I've been a Pacheco fan since he was drafted. Pre-draft process, I liked Isaiah Pacheco. I thought he had a great start to his career. Last year, I was all in buying Isaiah Pacheco. I do not think the Chiefs are going to give him a contract extension. And if the Chiefs don't sign him to an extension, I think he becomes a backup or a second part of a committee on another team. I do not think he gets signed to be a clear-cut starter. I think he gets signed to a team that is going to draft a rookie early in the first couple rounds, or he's a clear-cut part of a duo. So I think this is Isaiah Pacheco's last year to be really fantasy viable unless he re-signs in Kansas City. So because he's in Kansas City, if he gets off to a good start, if he looks good in preseason, I think you could still strike because he could be looked at as a guy who could still produce good RB2 numbers this year and have a lot of viability and value in a trade. So again, if you're not a contender, I am out on Isaiah Pacheco. I would want to sell him as soon as I think he shows that he's going to be the Chiefs guy this year. The Raiders, running back wide receiver Jacoby Myers. I think Jack Bech is going to be the inevitable replacement for Jacoby Myers. So I think right now, Jacoby Myers has continued to produce solid numbers. I think people still look at him as a rock-solid wide receiver 3-4 type. I think he's going to start to be phased out, probably on a new team in a year. So if that's the case, I think you can get something for him now before that value starts to fall out. Los Angeles Chargers, running back Najee Harris. I have not been a Najee Harris guy since he came into the league. I liked him when he came in the league, but since then, to me, he's a guy. He's a replaceable. They drafted him, Marion Hampton. Then Najee Harris had the 4th of July incident. So I even think this year it's probably going to be 70-30, 65-35 in favor of Marion Hampton. So if anybody's still looking at Najee Harris as a guy who's got some fantasy viability, I don't think he's got much standalone. I think he's going to be more of a handcuff. So if you can get rid of him, and again, get a young running back like Trey Benson, get a 3rd-round rookie pick. If somebody's willing to give that for Najee Harris, because on his back of his football card and his stats, still look like a solid player. I just think he's trending in the wrong way, and we're not going to see him get many more opportunities to be the guy. Los Angeles Rams, Kyren Williams. This has context to it. If Kyren Williams signs an extension with the Rams, he goes immediately from dynasty sell to dynasty buy, because then we're talking about, for the next 2 to 3 years, probably a rock-solid RB1. But if he doesn't sign that contract extension before the season starts, and you're not a contender, I think you get out early and get a lot back in return, because he's probably going to be unbelievable again this year. But I think then if they don't sign to a contract extension now, I think the writing is on the wall for them to maybe eventually not re-sign him, trade him if things really go sideways on their year. And I'm just not sure he's going to get nearly the workload on any other team as what the Rams feed him and how productive he is with the Rams. They've drafted Blake Corum and Jarquez Hunter each of the last 2 years. So I still think you can get a lot of value for Kyren Williams if you look to move him if you're not an immediate contender. Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill. We know he started to come down last year, but Tua was hurt. I think he's still got some productive years left. I really do. But I also could see a scenario where they trade him. Now, probably would be to a contender. A team would probably have a strong quarterback. I don't think a lot of teams would trade for Tyreek Hill if they weren't a contender with a strong quarterback presence. But if people are still looking at Tyreek Hill as a top 15-ish wide receiver and are willing to pay that price, I would look to move Tyreek Hill. I think Jalen Waddle and him, the value should be very close in dynasty leagues. I'm surprised there's still as much separation. I'm buying Jalen Waddle. I'm selling Tyreek Hill. Minnesota Vikings, running back Aaron Jones. Again, if you need him for this year and you're a contender, great. You hold on to him. You maximize what he offers this year, and you help your team. But they traded for Jordan Mason. Aaron Jones is getting up there in age. This is probably his last fantasy viable year, in my opinion. So again, if you're a contender, you hold. But if you're not a contender, I think you sell now. You get whatever you can for him. Again, I keep bringing back Trey Benson, but you can pick another young running back. But a Trey Benson type player, a late second round rookie pick, something like that, where you can get back something for Aaron Jones before he has no value if you're not a contender. Same thing's going to go with Ramondre Stevenson of the Patriots. I think this is probably his last year in New England. I think Trayvon Henderson is going to eat into a lot of his work. I think it's a very much David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs type situation, but Montgomery is way better than Stevenson. And I think the gap between Henderson and Stevenson is even wider than it is for Montgomery and Gibbs. So if you can get something for Stevenson, I would sell him now. New Orleans Saints, running back Alvin Kamara. I do not expect Alvin Kamara to finish the year on the Saints. I don't see any reason why he should. Now, yes, he probably would be traded to a contender, but we don't know if they have another running back there. We don't know if he'll be as involved. We definitely don't know if he'll be as involved in the pass game. So there's layers here that and he's up there in age and mileage. If you can trade Alvin Kamara to a contending team for a late first-round pick, I think I would do it. If you can get a young player in a second-round pick, I think I would move it. So that's where I am with Alvin Kamara. New York Giants, wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson. I know I like Wan'Dale Robinson player. I've always been a fan. But we're talking about a guy who got a lot of targets from Daniel Jones and Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito last year. I think his targets are going to go down this year. I think he might be more efficient, but I don't think we're going to see 90 catches again from Wan'Dale Robinson. So somebody might look at his stats last year and be like, oh, he was a 36 wide receiver in fantasy last year. He was a solid PPR wide receiver, 3-4 type, get me 10, 11 points. I don't know if that's going to be there with the new quarterback and the way they're going to call plays there for the Giants this year. New York Jets, quarterback Justin Fields. There's just so much uncertainty with Justin Fields. To me, this is his last shot. It's do or die. It's now or never for Justin Fields. We know when he's a starter, he produces, but I would ride that wave of momentum if I have him off a good couple of weeks. I think I would sell him. I still don't think he's going to be the long-term answer for the Jets or for any team at this point in his career. Philadelphia Eagles, tight end Dallas Goedert. I think this is his last year in Philadelphia. I think he still produces low tight end one value, but I think if you can get out a year early, get something back intriguing, I think I would do it. Maybe you can get back Hunter Henry in a third round pick or something like that. I don't think Hunter Henry is going to be that far off Dallas Goedert this year and get another asset, a dart at the dartboard, at a rookie pick. I think I would take that because I do think Goddard's going to be on another team. I think Philadelphia has kind of held him back, but also injuries and age are now catching up with him a little bit. Pittsburgh Steelers, wide receiver DK Metcalf. I would sell DK Metcalf. I think people are looking at Pittsburgh's situation, think he's going to be force-fed targets. He's going to see a lot of targets, but it's just Arthur Smith offense. I don't know if he's going to mesh well with Aaron Rodgers, to be frankly honest with you. He's got a lot of name value. I think he's still pretty reputable in dynasty rankings. If I could trade him for a guy who I like more in that general area or for a good rookie pick, I would do it. San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Jawan Jennings obviously broke out of nowhere last year. Now he's talking about holding out. He wants a new contract. I don't know if San Francisco is going to give that to him, to be frankly honest with you. Maybe they do something to make him appease him for this year. So we don't know if he's going to be there. If he stayed in San Francisco long-term, I'd probably be willing to hold him at where he's at right now. But if someone's looking at what he produced last year and is willing to give up a decent pick for him or a decent asset, I think I would move Jawan Jennings. Seattle Seahawks, wide receiver Cooper Kupp. The Rams were willing to let him leave and just flat out cut him. Jackson Smith-Njigba was best in the slot. Cooper Kupp is best in the slot, but Jackson Smith-Njigba is leaps and bounds a better player right now. So I think Cooper Kupp is more name than substance at this point. I think he still might have some spiked weeks here or there, but if you can get back, again, he's a contending team, maybe sure. You keep Cooper Kupp, he could be a decent wide receiver 4 or flex this year intermittently. But if you can get something for him and you're not an immediate contender, I would pull the trigger. Tampa Bay Bucks, wide receiver Chris Godwin. Emeka Egbuka is there. Mike Evans is there. Godwin's coming off a major injury. Egbuka is great in the slot. Godwin's best in the slot. I just think there's enough writing on the wall for him maybe not to produce at the value we've seen from Chris Godwin in the past. If I could sell high, I would. Tennessee Titans, running back Tyjae Spears. I love Tyjae Spears coming out, but there was some durability concerns. He has not been able to seize the job there in Tennessee. Tony Pollard has been the guy. They went out and got Tony Pollard. Spears did not eat into him a lot last year. I think he's kind of a satellite player. And that injury long-term is still looming that most people thought he was maybe a one-contract running back. I hope for his sake it's not, but I still think he might be a little bit more name value because he was such an interesting prospect that people liked and has not really lived up to it. And it doesn't seem like that's happening with Tennessee with the addition of Tony Pollard last year. So I would sell Tyjae Spears. And last but not least, the Washington Commanders running back Brian Robinson. I think they are going to make a big investment at running back. I think this year they were worried about the O-line. They went on and got Debo. They drafted Jalen Lane in the 4th round. I think next year you're going to see them in free agency or in the first couple rounds of the draft make a big investment at the running back position, which will hurt Brian Robinson's long-term value. So there it is, guys. 32 dynasty sells. And hopefully you're enjoying this content. Again, if you missed any of the previous 5 episodes, please go listen to them. My rankings and tiers for all 4 positions for Dynasty. And then last week, 32 Dynasty buys. I see you guys in the chat. I'm assuming JCM means Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt a lot in the pre-draft process. I think if he didn't have those eligibility issues, I think he probably is like a 4th round pick. So they might have found somebody, kind of like when the Chiefs found Isaiah Pacheco. I'm not ready to say he's the long-term answer, but I do think he's going to eat into Brian Robinson potentially a little bit this year. And potentially they add to the backfield and add somebody with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt next year as well. But I do think he's an interesting guy that could be a factor in Washington's backfield this year. Again, get over to the website, S2S Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. For $9.99, check out the premium content tab and check out all that we offer there. If you have any questions on that, please do not hesitate to reach out. The new wave of notebooks will come out on Labor Day, but so much still to be had from the previous year of notebooks. So on behalf of my sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us. And we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.